how do we envision an anti-racist English education, given the wide-ranging kind of politics across all four nations of the UK, but also the strong tradition of activism in and for education across the UK. And so we determined that there were four premises of power in English education, that English teachers, English language, literacy, and literature teachers really need to acknowledge when they step into the subject area. And that is, one, English is a colonial language of power. Standardized and academic English are linguistic varieties of power. Language is a communicative mode of power. And finally, there's a long list of entangled ideologies, but that these entangled ideologies of power are operationalized through language. So in other words, language is one means to make power real and has very material consequences as well as representational consequences. So it's the, if you can't see it, then you can't be it, kind of no problem here, right? So we hope to contribute to that policy and research shift. We also note that, as Khadija outlined, there are a number of ongoing, divisive, we find ourselves in divisive times, right? So we have, again, ongoing calls to decolonize education, calls for intersectional justice, so to see social issues and power in more and more complex ways, and as part of solidarity building, we see ourselves in an increasingly far-right conservatism where LGBTQIA rights, race equality, and immigration are suddenly coming into crisis, and some of those policies and laws are rolling back in many ways as well. That increasing far-right conservatism is also becoming more vocal and prominent in spaces. So even where they represent a minority perspective or viewpoint, they're actually taking up a lot of intellectual and physical space sometimes. So in the project, when my colleagues from Scott Deck approached me alongside TT, we were really there to support teachers and Scott Deck colleagues in producing, co-designing these anti-racist English education materials. This came at a key time, again, because of all of those kind of policy shifts, the gap in the research, as well as the ongoing kind of call in the kind of politics and society and culture, asking for more criticality. And so what we did was we tried to formulate this in relation to critical race literacies. So my background in critical literacies means that we were able to talk about language, meaning-making, power, and identity. And so if I speak really quickly about critical literacy itself, it's often described as the linguistic arm of critical pedagogies and is born from Paulo Freire's work. It has come to be a complex and interdisciplinary field that explores the relationship between communication, meaning-making, power, and identity in social and cultural context. And so one of its key kind of underpinning questions that it allows us to ask really is, how is language and other modes of communication used to construct different relations of power? The particular grammar of racialization includes some things to there's a lot of text on the screen, but is that identity markers started to help us understand that even in text, so even in linguistic text where through narrative, bodies are read, and that there are certain tropes, certain representations that emerge again and again, and that unless we're able to pinpoint them, name them, and explain the consequences of them or the effects of them in texts, and that then we're less able to become racially literate. Intersectionality surfaced as the recognition that constructions of race, racism, and even anti-racism, often perhaps always entangled with constructions of other identities, so that in terms of constructions of gender, but that this was also connected to colorblindness and color avoidance, so that there is a constant need to actively address race and racism in order to avoid colorblindness, and that sometimes race and racism fall by the wayside if other intersecting issues of power or identity are privileged in our minds and in the dominant discourses around us. And so in terms of the educational implications that we see from this, emerging from this ongoing project, is that one thing, like the network of resources and interventions elsewhere, so like the Building Racial Literacies program, primes teachers for more advanced critical race and anti-racist practice and knowledge building. So we need to actually build onto each other and connect to each other in more significant ways. That these teachers needed or really benefited from targeted collaborative professional development because it contributed toward contextually and culturally relevant learning. So it was really situated in our curriculum, in their experiences, and really we really valued the information that our participants brought to the space as well. And we learned so much from each other. And then to foster learners' critical race literacy depends on our commitment to fostering teachers' critical race literacy. And then for English education, we recognize that English remains a language of power, demonstrating the continued need for critical literacies at large, and that English language and literacy education is well suited for nurturing learners' critical consciousness across analytical, emotional, and imaginative dimensions.